MMA has certainly gotten to the point where it's a sport.
What?
Okay, you go into a gym, you take an MMA class, they'll teach you a range of different martial arts, they'll cover all the bases you need, and mostly they'll teach you the same things, the same basic principles.
Pretty simple. Balls and throw.
But you guys know MMA, when it comes to a fight, there's people who have had high levels of success in this sport by just doing things wrong. I'm not here today to argue that there's things that these fighters should change. In fact, the opposite. It actually works, and that's kind of the whole point of this list.
I call it the cocksucker guards. People don't do it.
I'm Balian from MMA On Point. Here are our lovely Hall of Famers. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. And these are 10 styles that shouldn't work in MMA. Okay, so a disclaimer for this one as well before you jump in the comments. A guy like Justin Gaethje, admittedly, he had to change his brawling style because it just wasn't working after those 2 hard UFC losses.
The way that I'm doing it is no longer bringing me success because I lost and I get to do things different.
We thought about somebody like Ryan Hall, but considering his most recent loss, we have a feeling he's gonna need to make some large changes to his existing style. Same goes for Kron Gracie or Claudio Puelles. Everyone on this list had success with their style at the UFC level. So here we go. Number 10, Roxanne Modafferi. Aside from being pretty unique as a person, let alone as an MMA fighter,
I'm the best candidate for Hokage of the day. Nihongo mo shaberu.
So Roxy is not only the happiest fighter in UFC history, but definitely one of the most awkward. She's been around since SmackDown in 2004, and you might think with all that experience she had time to round out her game, but the truth is for most of her career she was predominantly a grappler with a truly baffling striking style. At times she's looked a bit like an old lady trying to cross the road while moving around the cage, but the craziest thing about it is that it somehow works.
Twice into the power side of Roxy, she turns it like that!
As Dan Hardy described it, it's an unusual cadence. And despite her shuffling and starter-step footwork, she's beaten some top up-and-comers in the UFC. She handed Antonina Shevchenko her first ever loss in MMA when she was 7-0, and the striking technique difference could not have been more apparent in that one. But Roxy still got it done. She gave Macy Barber her first ever loss when she was 8-0, and she was tagging her on the feet, which set up those takedowns. She nearly took the O off Casey O'Neill with her awkward style before she finally hung up her gloves after a split decision. You couldn't replicate Roxy even if you wanted to, but she still gave tons of girls problems from the beginning to the end of her career. Number 9, Dan Kelly. If you weren't around to witness the UFC run of Dan Dadbod Kelly, I can only apologize to you because everyone was cheering for him with his strapped up knees and hunched over posture. He definitely didn't look anything like your average UFC middleweight, but my God, did that man know how to win a fight. He was a 4-time judo Olympian, but watch a Dan Kelly fight and you'll wonder whose dad is filling in for their son on short notice because they forgot their fight kit.
Dad. Oh my God.
The first time we saw Kelly was on Tough. He lost in 60 seconds, so you know expectations were even lower if I'm honest. But the UFC gave him a shot and he won 6 of his first 7 UFC fights, including racking up a 4-fight win streak. Some highlights were him herky-jerking his way around the future PFL champ Antonio Carlos Jr. and just forced him to fight his fight, which ended in a second round TKO. And then after Rashad Evans went into super shredder mode and dropped to 185, Kelly beat a former UFC champion. His punches were loopy, his footwork was stiff. Did I mention he was nearly 40? There just looked to be so many holes in his game, but he was still able to beat some stiff UFC competition. Number 8, Chris Lieben. Being durable in MMA is a great trait. It's obviously something all high-level fighters need, but you never want to be known as the guy that's great at taking damage. Then you know you're doing something wrong. But let me tell you, friends, for as long as the old crippler's chin lasted, he was extremely hard to finish, and Chris, being Chris, just kind of lent into that, so much that it literally became part of his fighting style. He'd stand in the pocket and trade with anyone, mostly with his hands down, just basically trying to hit you first, but, you know, harder. I mean, he was the first man, and the only man for a while, to have beaten Mike Swick, and he did it by just going face first into his punches. At one point, he was 15-2 and on a 5-fight UFC win streak, and he was outgunning other great middleweights like Patrick Cote and Jorge Rivera. Now, obviously, that style didn't work against Anderson Silva, but all of Chris's 4 UFC KO of the nights came in fights where he just walked into punches with zero defense, just swinging back, which definitely should not work unless you're Chris Lieben. Number 7, Yoel Romero. See, the thing is, there's a lot of things about Yoel Romero's game that should and do work, like this silver medal Olympic wrestling. But how many times did he actually use that to win fights? I mean, the man's an entertainer, I guess. But go find me another guy who can just stand still in front of some of the best fighters in the world and let strikes bounce off his adamantium torso and basically do nothing for an entire round before timing one perfect flying knee and just ending the fight. I mean, that's not even fair, is it? Imagine being Yoel's coach. Okay, dude, I want you to go in there and just do nothing. Just wait, be really patient, then try and throw one massive shot out of nowhere. I think it might work. No, dude, that basically never works, like ever, unless you have the athleticism of a cat and the eyes of Nightman. Honestly, it doesn't even look like Yoel is fighting in there sometimes. He's either dancing or just playing a game. But he's still, at one point, one of the best middleweights in the world. Number 6, Derek Lewis. Being a big heavyweight knockout machine isn't really that uncommon of a style. There's definitely a few guys who've made careers out of doing that. I still don't think, though, anyone has done it quite like Derek. Let's start with the fact that in a lot of his fights, you often see Derek hunched over in pain, or even maybe just pretending to be, or maybe he just needs the toilet.
I gotta take a shit. Oh, hello?
Can you hear me, brother?
Oh, yeah, what's up, man?
Either way, not exactly intelligent defense, but when someone comes in to finish him, he unleashes a fireball of a right hand, faking or not, putting your hands on your knees and then nearly flatlining someone. Yeah, that shouldn't work. But for Derek, I mean, it does. How about when he gets taken down and he's on the bottom and instead of digging for underhooks, he just stands up like he's getting out of bed in the morning? Again, that shouldn't work, but you know, Derek makes it work. And what about his crazy comebacks where he's been able to get multiple knockouts in the third round after 10 minutes of hell, where somehow he still has the energy and composure to finish guys that have been dominating him? Not many people have the patience of the Black Beast to wait for his moment to strike, and he's beaten some of the best heavyweights in the world. Number 5, Genki Sudo. I don't know if it's because MMA is at such a high level these days, but you don't get a lot of showmanship in a fight anymore. I mean, Yoel Romero has a bit of flair, and sometimes Izzy does those Matrix taunts, but if you compare that to some of the stuff Genki Sudo was doing, he exists in a class of his own. His style was a mix of slick grappling transitions with some of the craziest techniques you've ever seen anyone use in an MMA fight. And who can forget the ballet performance he put on against Butterbean? He even came out against the 8-1 Mike Brown with that crazy style and ended up beating him as well. And he ended his career with a pretty goddamn good record. Not many people have the confidence or the dance moves to pull off some of the stuff Genki did, and I definitely wouldn't recommend you go to the gym and try it. Number 4, Sean Strickland. I think if you try to point out what makes Sean's style successful in MMA, it isn't immediately obvious, and he has been super successful at middleweight. The guy has great cardio, but more than anything, he's just consistent with his defense and his output. I mean, he currently has the highest striking defense of any active UFC middleweight with 65.4%, which is surprising because most coaches would look at his stance and tell you that it's just wrong. He reaches out to parry punches, he holds his hands in like a modified Philly shell style, which I mean is not really the best stance for MMA.
I call it the cocksucker guard so people don't do it, because it's not defending anything.
He puts his weight on his back leg, he leans backwards, it's just all kinds of things a coach would look to adjust, but Sean absolutely makes it work for him. Just not against Alex Pereira, obviously.
I could spar Alex and I could go point for point and I could hit him. But the difference is the man touches you and you just die.
Number 3, Keith Jardine. I've heard the Dean Amin's fighting style described in a lot of different ways. Some people say he looks like a chimpanzee, but regardless of whatever animal you personally see, if you watch him move around the octagon, you'll probably notice there's something just not quite right. The polite way it's been described is herky-jerky, but it's also mainly surprising because he trained under Greg Jackson, the breeder of champions. But that unpredictable style got him to 9-1 before getting into the second season of The Ultimate Fighter and then the UFC, where he gave a bunch of people problems. He was just very hard to read, and he would lunge in outside a punching range over and over again, just hoping to land first. And dude, he TKO'd Forrest Griffin in the first round while going into wild man mode. And I mean, he even beat Chuck Liddell right after he'd been champion, proving that as weird and awkward as Keith's style was, he could still beat some of the best in the world. Number 2, Drickus du Plessis. Well, I couldn't count the amount of tweets I saw during UFC 290 Fight Week about how Robert Whittaker was going to effortlessly pick apart Drickus.
What's up, fuck mother?
And that it wasn't even going to be close. And look, I can't pretend I didn't think that it was going to be an easy night for Rob either. Why did everyone think that? Well, apart from looking completely gassed in most of his UFC fights, he's another guy that moves very awkwardly. He's got spooky striking. It just looks like he does everything wrong. I mean, shit, the shot that rocked Rob, he wasn't even looking. But he does have the highest strikes landed per minute of any middleweight in the entire history of the UFC, and the highest striking differential. More importantly, and quite surprisingly, he also has one of the highest accuracies of any middleweight as well, which goes to show his style is actually way more effective than anyone has been giving him credit for. He hits hard, he's super difficult to read with all these changes in tempo. That's 6 wins now in the UFC, 5 stoppages, and he's the only man to beat Bobby Knuckles, not named Izzy, since Wonderboy KO'd him at welterweight 10 years ago. Will the jank work against Adesanya? Well, there's only one way to find out. Fight! Number 1, Yuri Prohaska. Okay, when it comes to weird styles and quite frankly weird people, there's only one man we could put at number 1. It's got to be King of the Woods, Lord of the Samurais, Yuri Prohaska. I get that the Book of 5 Rings is about one-on-one combat, but I don't know if anyone has actually taken it as literally as Yuri, who definitely tries to be the guy to strike first, I guess strike hard, and definitely show no mercy. Okay, I lied, that's totally Cobra Kai. But the way Yuri leaps around side to side in fights, slicing towards his opponent with non-stop straight punches, just all offense, I mean, it's just beautiful. And even when he's hurt, you know, most coaches will tell you to get your hands up, circle out, but nah, he just walks backwards firing punches, and most of the time he's gonna knock you out.
Showing his resolve. Prohaska, a beautiful right hand.
Even when he's tired, he just throws himself at guys. But you know what the craziest thing is about this style? Is that this man doesn't block punches, like ever. He just doesn't do it. He just moves his head and his feet, and his defense is his offense. And that's put him on a 12-fight, 7-year unbeaten streak. Only one of them was a decision, and he finished everyone else brutally. He's also won 2 world titles, making him the most successful awkward fighter ever. Okay, well, he's not here with me today, but I do want to say thank you to Luke Taylor. He edited this video. We're talking about styles, mate. I mean, I never think his style's going to work, but he's got that mullet, isn't he? And he does make that work. Also, I want to say thank you to all you people who have signed up down below and become a channel champion. We've got a bunch of exclusive content we've been shoving in your face. You know, you've been having unedited podcast episodes. Are the black bits in bananas spiders' eggs?
Yes, always. That's why you have to eat bananas so quickly.
Regardless, if you're a Just Bleed member or the top one, whatever that is. What is it?
Hall of Famer.
The Hall of Famers. You'll get access to 2 30-minute podcast episodes a week. Some of you have been getting in on the writers meeting and giving us ideas for these lists, okay? If you see something in this list you didn't like, you could have been there in the writers meeting and said to me, Balian, you're an idiot. This is wrong. Well, tough. Although if you do want to do that, become a channel champion, lots of that and more. Thank you for the support, everybody. We appreciate it. Thank you. If you do think there's anyone I missed, or you want to talk about styles that shouldn't work or do work, even if it's like Sean O'Malley's hairstyle, because I mean, he does make that work. It must be the tattoos. Anyway, if you want to talk about that, go ahead, leave a comment down below. We do look at them, and you guys can get into arguments with each other. I find that the best part of my Monday, just reading you guys shout at each other. It's great. It's brilliant. Like and subscribe as well. Don't forget. I appreciate that. Oos.